Hello, it's Wednesday night. My name's Garland Nixon, and I'm here with a dear friend of mine and one of my favorite guests, Dr. Tony Monteiro. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here, and I'm here with Dr. Tony Monteiro. We're going to talk about the election 2024. And Dr. Monteiro is doing fine work in Philadelphia with the Saturday Free School. They're doing a lot of great work on W.E.B. Du Bois and a lot of great leaders and really doing a lot to teach people. And so we're going to talk about what's happening, we call it a political collapse, a political realignment. I'm not sure what to call it, but things are changing. I know I had someone call in on my radio show a few weeks ago and said, well, Garland, we've got to get Kamala in. And basically, everything's crashing, the system's falling to pieces, and we got to save it. And I said, you got me wrong. I am not the cure. I'm the disease. I'm not the one trying to save this system. I'm the one that's been telling you it surely will fall and it can't stay, and we need a better system. And one of the people that I've learned a lot from is Dr. Monteiro. So let's start here, Tony. I used a term to introduce this segment called the Dick Cheney Democrats. Democrats are they something different? I don't know. Your thoughts on the state of the Democratic Party and how they got here?
Well, thank you for having me, Garland. And, the question of what is the Democratic Party these days is a huge question, and certainly for Black folk, for a good part of the working class, in fact, because this is not the party of Franklin D. Roosevelt. It's not even the party of Lyndon B. Johnson. This is something very different. I think we can say at the outset that the Democratic Party is the party of American imperialism and all that that means. It is a party that is committed to American hegemony in the world. As such, it has abandoned working people and Black people while trying to maintain this image that it is the party of working people, that it is the party of Black people, and it is the party of neither. And I think right now, the party is so close to collapsing in upon itself in ways that no one could have predicted or expected. So if you ask me, what is the Democratic Party? I would say it is a party of imperialism, a party of war, a party of white supremacy. And I know that's a hard and bitter pill for many people to swallow, because the normal discourse these days is that Trump and the Republicans are white supremacists, and the Democrats, the Democratic Party, has inherited the mantle of the civil rights movement and of Martin Luther King. I would say that the main party of white supremacy is the Democratic Party, and it is such because of who makes up its leadership more than who makes up the members of the Democratic Party. This is a leader-driven, authoritarian party, and the values of the elite that run the party ultimately are the values of the party itself. And it's very easy for me to see a Bill Clinton or Hillary Clinton in particular as representatives of white supremacy and American imperialism. and war. Uh, and if you needed any convincing about the Clintons, all you have to do is go to the Crime and Anti-Terrorism Bill of 1994. I don't think there's been many instances of federal legislation that has been so white supremacist. Uh, you would literally have to go back to, and I don't even know if you would find it then, to the 1870s and 1880s to find federal legislation which so upheld uh, a system of white supremacy, as was the case with the Crime and Anti-Terrorism Bill. It devastated the Black community. It devastated at least two generations. And it put more Black men in jail than were alive at the height of enslavement in the 1850s. That just shows you how really white supremacist it was. And going forward, the Democratic Party uses a phalanx, a army of Black intellectuals, Black politicians, so-called civil rights leaders who are nothing more than apologists for this system of white supremacy and for the Democratic Party, as I have described it, as a party of war, imperialism, and white supremacy. It is everything that Martin Luther King targeted when he asked the question, where do we go from here, chaos or community? And he said the only way we move towards community is fighting against war, racism, and poverty. And the Democratic Party is a party that brings us war, racism, and poverty. So it is a sophisticated operation. It knows how to use all of the techniques of marketing and branding. It knows how to image itself, give itself a certain image of being diverse and inclusive, but it is also able to carry out, because of this perception, to carry out what I consider to be the most draconian policies. I know this raises many questions about the 2024 election. We're a month away from that. It raises questions about the Democratic Party's relationship to Zionism and to Israel. It raises questions, all of these types of questions, I would say, yes.
So let's get right into the 2024 election. You know, I was doing a podcast, interview with someone who is an avowed socialist, right? That's their avowed ideology. And at some point, you know, the term came up, the lesser of two evils. And I made a statement. This is my opinion. I said, I don't care who thinks about what you think of me or whatever. I said, it is clear to me that in the 2024 election, if we vote for the lesser of two evils, that Trump is by far the lesser of two evils. One of the things I pointed to was the avenues of attack that the Democratic leadership have chosen to go after Trump, such as one of the main avenues of attack when it comes to foreign policy is that he tried to bring peace to the Korean Peninsula. That's one of their, he's met with Kim Jong-un. And I thought, well, if you just think of Kim Jong-un as an evil personage, an evil personality, and we ignore all policy, then okay, he's some kind of an evil demon and you shouldn't meet with evil personalities. But that's if you picture him that way, which I don't really. But my point is, it was devoid of substance. And it was an attack on, you know, Trump did a few things that I like. I can point out to some things that plenty that I didn't like, plenty that I did like. I can point out to that as something I like. And that specifically was the avenue they chose to attack him, along. Your thoughts?
Yeah, this is a very interesting question, the lesser of two evils. Um, this election is the most unusual election in modern American history. First of all, uh, Trump does represent an outsider. He does represent that uh, candidate that almost the entire ruling class and most of the institutions of society and of the state have targeted to destroy, either through what they call lawfare or through assassination. And the interesting thing is that no one was surprised at the attempted assassinations of him. We were not surprised because we all expected it. Why did we all expect it? Because it was obvious the vitriol and viciousness that all of the institutions of the ruling class were going after him with. This had never been seen. Now, he is by no means my favorite candidate. But when one looks at the political situation in this country and the crisis in this country and in the world as a result of the war policies, when one looks at all of that, you would have to say Trump is the lesser of evils compared to the Democratic Party and compared to Kamala Harris. A defeat for her and the Democrats is objectively a necessity if we are to have a fighting chance in the struggle for world peace. So people would say, well, look, Trump talks about Israel and defending Israel. He hates Iran. Some would say, well, he's a tool of Putin and he likes Kim Jong-un of North Korea. That is the problem, that Trump is not the answer to the total question of how we move the nation forward. Trump addresses one specific problem, and that is the problem of the Democratic Party and the Black misleadership class, which has used Black people ruthlessly. And as you know, I'm from Philadelphia. If I brought you here and you saw the poverty that we live under, that our people are suffering, if you saw the schools that our children have to go to, one would say that the Black misleadership class from Obama on down has betrayed Black people, has used the goodwill and the aspirations of Black people against us. So, I have this idea, this tactical idea, that to free Black people, in part it is to free us from the Black misleadership class, giving our people the opportunity to enter into a dialogue, a discourse about what our future is, unmediated by the mass media and its Black representatives. Black folk need this very, very badly. Our people are at this point without leadership, without direction, and they want to discuss these issues. But that's the way I feel about it. Kamala Harris and the Democratic Party must be defeated, if for no other reason. If you can't get any other reasons, the sending of 2,000-pound bombs to drop on hospitals and schools and communities and mosques in Gaza. And now they use the same kind of bombs, I'm told maybe 15 of them, to kill Hassan Nasrallah, Nasrallah, and this they have to be punished, politically punished for that, I think.
I think you're right, and also with the Russian issue, um, what we've spent 150, 170 million dollars on a proxy war in Ukraine,
Yeah.
endangered the entire all of humanity for the nuclear war, destroyed Europe. I mean, what they've done to Europe is inexcusable. The Europeans have just getting their economy wiped out. So we're looking at a recklessness that is without precedent. It is without precedent, this level of
It really
recklessness.
is.
Ronald Reagan met with the leader of Russia, a man who was an avowed anti-communist, and Russia, the Soviet Union, was communist. But they knew that they knew that the leadership of this country had one job, and that one job was to make sure that we didn't get involved in a nuclear war and nuclear annihilation. And now the Blinkens and the people of this, it's we must stop Putin at all cost, at the cost of all of our lives. At right now, I look at what's happening in North Carolina, where my relatives originated, many North Carolina, Louisiana, and the place is a disaster. And we just sent another $13 billion to the war machine.
Yeah, I mean, it's obvious. If a central issue, I think it is the central issue in this election, is war and peace, you cannot vote for Harris. Now, they cannot be for democracy and for war at the same time. They cannot be for the poor and for war at the same time. These are divergent positions. So I would agree with you. I think it is, for many Black people, a difficult question. Trump has not proven himself to be a friend of the Black community, but neither has Harris, by the way. But in this contest, for this election, he would be better than Kamala Harris, because generally his position on war and peace is better than that of the Democratic Party. Well, by the way, his position on war and peace is better than the position of the majority of the Republican Party. So he is this singular figure who is difficult to pigeonhole. But at the end of the day, we do know the administration that is in power, and we do know, like you say, $170 billion for a proxy war in the Ukraine. And the only thing that is slowing down the spending on Ukraine is that they have to send more money to Israel. So it is the Democratic Party has brought the world closer to nuclear war, closer than the world has ever been to nuclear war. And the American people, for this reason, will have to play perhaps one of the most important roles that a nation has ever played, and that is to oppose its own government, because its own government endangers world humanity. And so that's the way I look at it. And I've been talking kind of like this for a little while now. I didn't think we could support Biden because of the war policy. And we're not out of the woods by a long shot. The situation between Iran and Israel, between Israel and Lebanon or Hezbollah, the situation in Gaza, this is one of the most dangerous situations we've ever faced. Obviously, the Biden administration wants Israel to hold off because they can't afford too many October surprises, such as a all-out war between Israel and Iran, which would, of course, bring the Houthis and Hezbollah into it, and others, by the way. Uh, the Democrats want to elect Kamala Harris so that they can do all of this after the election. And they realize that the majority of the American people are pretty much against these wars and against war spending at this level. But how this will play out is very, very difficult to predict. Uh, if you were to ask me from where I sit in Philadelphia, I would say that Kamala Harris is going to have a very difficult time winning Pennsylvania because the Democratic Party is bleeding Black voters, and it is bleeding faster than any other group, I think, Black male voters. In Philadelphia, the Black poor, the Black working class, in particular Black men, either are not going to vote at levels that are required in order that the Democrats take Pennsylvania, or they're going to vote for Trump or the Green Party.
I agree. It never fails that when I have these discussions, I look in the chat and people say, but Trump is terrible on this and he endorses these bad things. And I say, I agree with you. I'm concerned for Venezuela and Cuba and a lot of other countries that I hold dear that Trump may try all kind of miscreant activity with. That being said, as Malcolm X said when talking about the field slaves, sometimes you have to say any place is better than here.
Yeah.
That's the way I see it. And when people say, but Trump's terrible too, I say, I agree with you. He's bad on this. I could go on and tell you all the things Trump's bad on. However, I'm not even saying Trump has to win. I'm saying Kamala Harris has to lose.
Yeah.
And it's possible for her to have to lose. Apparently, that Trump has to win. That's my opinion. I know a lot of people don't like it or whatever, but I think that we're not just looking at people that are a problem or are distasteful. We're looking at people that are dangerous for all of humanity. And might I add, a few weeks ago, we were talking about, are they going to do deep strikes into Russia, or are we going to end up in a nuclear war where we all die? Okay. Within weeks, that hasn't gone away. Now we're talking about, will Israel strike Iran? Will nuclear weapons be used? Iran said, look, if you do that, all the U.S. bases get wiped out and all the oil infrastructure gets wiped out. And now that's an economic nuke. There will be, make no mistake about it, there will be starvation, death, crime, everything if the oil infrastructure wipes out and puts us back into the Stone Ages for Israel.
Yeah.
And I think people don't take the level of danger into consideration when you have this conversation.
Yeah, and again, it's a difficult discussion to have. In a lot of ways, history kind of informs the way we look at the present and the future, and no one of conscience will ever forget the 6 million Jews that were more or less exterminated by the Nazis. However, I would say that Netanyahu and his clique are more dangerous to world humanity than Hitler was, because a world war ultimately becomes a nuclear war. The Israelis have nuclear weapons. They denied this for many, many, many years, but now it's undeniable. They have nuclear weapons and are prepared to use them. In Gaza, they're prepared to use them against Iran, against Syria, Lebanon. There is nothing constraining this regime in Israel, these maniacs, these genocidists. At least the Nazis tried to hide what they were doing in the death camps to the Jews and others, of course. Netanyahu and them don't try to hide anything. It's all out in the open. And then for the Israeli Jewish population to be all in with this genocide, and to feel that they somehow have a right if they are, quote, threatened to take all of humanity down, and they said it, and they are prepared to do it. And the last time I looked, Israel did not produce 2,000-pound bombs. They had to get them from the United States. So our government, the Biden administration, is complicit in a genocide and will be complicit in a war, a regional war that could become a world war. This is what we're looking at. And like James Baldwin says, the American people have to grow up. It's no thing of I didn't know. That's no excuse. You might not know, but you can know. And the American people will have to play a central role in this struggle to stay the hand of the genocidists, the neocons, the imperialists, the war makers. So yeah, that's where I'm coming from. And you know, Garland, you know, we have to deal with the cards that we were dealt. Neither you nor I or most Americans had anything to do with the construction of this system, this political system. But we have to be aware of the contradictions within it. And sometimes the contradictions rise to a level where to resolve them requires something extraordinary, something that you didn't anticipate. If you want things to go like they've been going or like you think they should go, maybe you should go to Disneyland, because the real deal is that history does not move in ways that we like it to move. No one 10, 20 years ago could have predicted the Russia-China alliance, or better, the Russia-China, North Korea-Iran alliance. No one could have predicted a détente between Saudi Arabia and Iran. No one 20 years ago could have predicted the BRICS, which I understand about 30 or 40 nations are standing outside knocking on the door saying, let us in. You know, we could not have predicted this world that we inhabit, nor could we have fully predicted a phenomenon like Trump. And it is a phenomenon. And, you know, you don't like to talk about it, let alone think about it. There's probably going to be another assassination attempt on him. Everybody is predicting it. They're just getting too close to him. The first one, this guy, young cat, was about 100 yards away. This last one, he may have been even closer. And he had been waiting in the bushes outside the golf course for 12 hours. So he was focused, he was armed, an AK-47. Now there are going to be other attempts. Of course, this will further destabilize the political system in the United States. Not only is the nation politically divided in ways that we have never seen it, but these divisions are almost like two sides of a civil war. And certainly all sides are armed. But then the political division among the people does not tell the whole story, because you have a consolidation of state power in the hands of a very, very few people who see the American people as their enemy. It was Richard Haas, and I'm going to shut up. I'm talking too
No,
much.
no. Yeah.
Richard Haas, formerly the president of the Council on Foreign Relations, who said in a New York Times interview in the latter part of 2023 that the greatest threat to the security of the United States is not China or Russia, North Korea, or Iran. He said the greatest threat to the security of the United States is the American people. and what he meant is that the American people do not trust their leaders, do not trust the foreign policy experts, do not trust war and war makers, and therefore they are political enemies of the state. So this is where we are. We got a month to see how all of this plays out, but perhaps as important as November 5th is going to be, I think November 6th might be as important, if not more so.
Yes, yes, I certainly agree with that. Something I wanted to ask you about, and I've been thinking about this a lot, and that is the language that we use when regarding to politics, right? The Biden people, the Democratic Party, is still trying to refer to themselves as the left, right? And the machine people, the people who are see politics through the lens that our media gives us, they're the left, Biden's the left, blah blah blah. I came up with the left, and my history in the left is similar to yours. My dad was a longshoreman. They go on strike now. ILA. The left was anti-war. The left was extremely suspicious of the concentration of power, be it corporations or whatever. There were certain elements of the left that were, didn't trust the corporations, didn't trust the rich, etc. But so now we have a people that call themselves the left that are absolute voices for the ruling elite, that are pro-war, so much so that they attack the anti-war movement even more so than the right. In fact, sadly, it
Yeah.
seems to me that the only anti-war element that we have in this country, the libertarians, I may not agree with them, but Ron Paul and Rand Paul, and they're saying, let's not go to war. I listen to the libertarians. I do. Okay. Within the Trump element of the party, there is a true anti-war movement. Disagree with them on a lot of other things, but the only place I can find an anti-war movement right now, and I'll even say this: many of them have a lack of trust for corporations. So the only place I can find the elements that once resided in the left, sadly, are in what they refer to as the populist right. And what the AOCs, the Bernies, they are the biggest imperialist attacking. Oh, you are a lover of Putin. Oh, you're a anti-Semite because you're not in favor of the Zionist regime in Israel. So your thoughts on the issue of ideology and the labels used for ideology regarding in the context of current politics?
Yeah. The question of ideology is very, very important in the long run. However, ideology is not playing the role that it must play at this time, and therefore there's a lot of ideological unclarity. However, people instinctively know that we're in dangerous times. They know that. Now, they also know that there is a political realignment going on. I know in Philadelphia, I can tell you, Garland, well, I'll put it this way. I speculate that 30,000 Black male voters can decide who will be the next president. And that is because they have the possibility in this divided electorate and the importance of the Black vote to the Democrats, for the Democrats, those 30,000 Black men can make the difference in Pennsylvania by how they vote or if they vote at all. And the who wins Pennsylvania, I think, will win the presidency. So it's really interesting how so much in this election will be decided by a few number of voters. And it's even more interesting, perhaps ironic, that this election could be decided by a relatively small handful of Black male voters. What they do in this divided electorate, where a state like Pennsylvania is on the cutting edge, the front line of deciding this election, 30,000 Black men in Philadelphia could be the deciding factor. And, you know, that speaks volumes from a historical standpoint. Du Bois understood it in his book, Black Reconstruction in America. James Baldwin understood it when he said, for example, speaking to America, it is through me, through the Black struggle, that America must go if it is to achieve a true democracy. And in spite of everything that has been done to Black men, the imprisonment, the unemployment, the lack of education, the poor health care, the homelessness and poverty, which exceeds any single group in the society. In spite of all that, Black men could decide the next president.
Yes, that's pretty amazing. You know,
and let me just say one other
sure,
thing.
go ahead. Yeah, absolutely.
Are they left or are they right? It's according to who's defining these political positions. What does it mean? Is Hillary Clinton left? Is Biden and Kamala Harris left? Well, no, not at all. But those who control the means of communication and propaganda can impose their concepts of the world upon the rest of us. And that's where this clash of ideas is so important. And we are in that kind of moment where ideas are hugely significant. I think, by the way, I think that the ideological struggle is so important because who wins the ideological struggle wins the future. Anybody that thinks you're going to wage a struggle for the future and not at the same time fight for the ideological clarity and ideological maturity of the people, I don't know what history you've studied. And that's what we do in Philadelphia. I mean, to work tirelessly to bring ideas and discourse and thinking and so on to people through libraries and bookstores and schools and colleges. People must know. People must have their sights lifted. And this goes against everything that the ruling class wants to submerge the masses, to make them think you can't do anything, you're worthless. The future will be decided by elites and so on. We're trying to do the opposite. And I think the right ideas will win the day ultimately.
The ruling elite certainly understand the importance of discourse, the importance of conversation, the importance of open, intellectual, philosophical, epistemological, dare I say, conversation. And here's a perfect example. The other day at a World Economic Forum panel on green energy, um, uh, um, John Kerry said that the First Amendment makes it, quote, really hard to govern today. He said, the referees we used to have to determine what is fact and what isn't have been kind of eviscerated. If people go to only one source and they're putting out disinformation, our First Amendment stands as a major block to simply hammering it out of existence. Right. So he says, I think Democrats are very challenged right now and have not proven they can move fast enough or big enough to address the challenges we face. To me, that is part of what this election is all about. So here's a man who no one could speak for the ruling elite. For God's sake, he married the woman who owns Heinz Ketchup. He got his money the old fashioned way, right? He married it. But he's right out. Look, the First Amendment is a problem. We must determine what is fact and what isn't fact. Where it's the opposite of what Dr. Tony Monteiro says that we must have a conversation and we must hear dissident voices, and it's okay to hear the voices of the ruling elite.
Yeah, and in the battle or competition of ideas, let the strongest ideas win out. But John Kerry's position is not his position alone. I would argue that among elite intellectuals and academics, political scientists and researchers, as well as politicians of the left, as they say,
Yeah.
this idea of limiting the First Amendment. We saw it in the spring when they shut down the student encampments. Those student encampments were a rich expression of freedom of speech, of freedom of discourse, of freedom to dissent. And they were shut down viciously. Mayor Eric Adams of New York is now under indictment for doing a lot of things they say that he should not have been doing. But he had no constraints when it came to shutting down those students at Columbia University, no constraints. And he instructed his police force to go after them. And they went after them in the most harsh manner. But now he wants empathy and sympathy from us. Give me a fair hearing. But those students didn't get it from you. So much for Black leadership or the Black misleadership class. But yeah, they have to shut down discussion. And I think the pivotal point is war and peace. War and peace, another way to talk about war and peace is to talk about the U.S. empire. And all of those things. And they've said that the people don't have a right to know. I think this is a violation of the civil and human rights of ordinary people. They do have a right to know. They must know. There is no such thing as citizenship where the citizenry cannot have access to information and dialogue and discourse. What John Kerry was saying, we're going to wage a war, a class war, if you will, against the poor, against the working people. Garland, the thing that really bothers me, your dad comes out of the ILA, my father does. I was in that industry for a while. So we know something about the working class. We know something about what deindustrialization did. When you talk about the longshoremen's industry, we know what containerization did, the jobs that were lost. You and I have come through that. We experienced that. We experienced the hopes of the Black community built upon the idea that if we can get good jobs, if unions can be strong, Black freedom is elevated. We can better fight if we can feed ourselves and educate our children. But now Kerry is saying that working people have no right to know. And you get the likes of a Sean Fain, the head of the UAW, who wants to say to his members, not who do you want, but who I want and who I favor. But what about the members that are paying your salary? You understand where I'm coming from? And again, back to the universities. The universities are the opposite of centers of learning. They've become centers of propaganda, where billionaires decide who will be the president of a university, what will be the rights of students. Billionaires are redefining what does the word anti-Semitism mean. And if a student protesting Israel uses the word Zionism or anti-Semitism, he is violated. Isn't this Orwellian? He or she has violated free speech and has encroached upon the freedom, and this is quote, freedom of speech of those students who are pro-Israel or pro-Zionist. So you shut a student down, you say you can't use the word Zionism, or you can't use the word anti-Semitism, or you can't criticize Israel without violating some rule or some regulation at an elite university. So at that point, Kerry is not just talking about what could be, he's talking about what is right now, you know? And so the whole question of democracy, the rule of the people, is so far removed from the realities of the American polity, the American society, that the question is for the American people, how will we recapture all of this? You know, how will we regain this? If Garland or myself, if we cannot freely discuss matters of existential significance to humanity, if we can't discuss that, if we'll be shut down, if there's a threat of assassinating leaders or people or politicians who go against the grain, who express dissident views, if that is what we're dealing with, then we have to relook at what the character and nature of our struggle going forward will be. What are we up against? Have we already crossed over into an authoritarian dictatorship where the people have very, very few rights and the poor have no rights? Have we gone there? And must we then consider how to go forward? That's the way I would put it.
I agree with you. Now, and there's another issue, I think, and that is the illusion of fairness, the illusion of a fair and honest and society. And here's my example. What the so-called fake Democratic left argues now that makes them the left is the leader, the general that they chose to put in charge of AFRICOM is Black, General Langley. The woman who's at the Linda Thomas Greenfield at the UN, who whenever they say, well, we should tell Israel they have to stop, I object. The woman who's in charge of Latin America and the Caribbean, she's a general. The whatever Southcom, these are all commanding, like we command these regions. Woman, I believe she's a queer female, right? The spokesman for Biden, Karine Jean-Pierre, whatever, someone, I heard someone challenge her or something, and at first word out of her mouth, well, I'm a Black queer female, blah, 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 right? I turn on Hollywood, and on top of all the propaganda, every chewing gum advertisement I see as a black person, a white person, a Muslim person, a woman, an Asian person, a gay person, a this, or that, right? This putting forward this illusion that and this concept that if they put all of these different faces in representative groups, somehow that redefines them now as the left. I can be a warmonger. I can be, work for the prison industrial complex. I can do all the terrible things in the world. But if I have this diverse group of people on every chewing gum advertisement or in charge of every oppressive imperialist part of the regime, that somehow makes me the left. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to say. I mean, it is so ludicrous. You know, the concept of left and right come out of the French Revolution. And it was basically what side of the uh, parliament they sat on. The left sat on the left and the right sat on the right. And so that became a way of defining politics and political positions going forward. Uh, with the rise of Marxism and communism, the left was defined by its relationship to the communist movement, to the world peace movement, to the anti-colonial movements. If you were left, you fought against colonialism. You fought for peace. You fought for civil rights. You fought for labor rights. Well, that makes, therefore, the exemplar of the left, people like W.E.B. Du Bois or Baldwin or Paul Robeson or Angela Davis at one time, or others, Fannie Lou Hamer, Diane, the great Diane Nash, by the way. That is the left. And anything that is not like that is not the left, it is the right. Some would say, well, they are the center. People ask about Bernie Sanders. Is Bernie Sanders the left? And I agree with you, Garland. If he is, it's such a weak left as to be insignificant. If you want a left popular figure, it's Martin Luther King Jr., if that's what you're interested in. But if you don't see that as the model, the paradigm to be lived up to, then what are you talking about? And then we can go even deeper and ask the question, great movements. If you take the Black movement is the most consistently, or has been the most consistent, left force in this country. It is the anchor of what is left. Even in the time of the organizing of the industrial unions and all that took, and the activism of the working class, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, still the anchor of what is left in a popular movement sense was then and is today the Black movement, the Black people, the highest level of consciousness of any single demographic in this country. Beleaguered as we are, attacked on all sides by the ruling elite, as we have been, in a sense, as payback for the civil rights movement, payback for doing good and advancing democracy. Not only did we have the assassination of our leaders, but we had our movement, our community come under all-sided assaults, and especially a pop culture that degrades Black people, that uses language that we never used in public in talking to each other or about one another. Never, never. Suddenly, we have billionaires who are exemplars of this so-called pop culture. And what does it mean for a presidential candidate sitting vice president to open her a rally with Megan Thee Stallion. Why, I mean, what are you saying? Well, first of all, I don't want my grandchildren to see Megan Thee Stallion or Cardi B, those sexualized images of Black women, to be role models for my children. I really don't. So why you, a so-called Black woman, Kamala Harris, why are you leading with this kind of imagery? At this time, by the way, at this time, when the stakes are so high for the world and for Black folk, if you understand where I'm coming from, this is an all-sided attack. Now, are Black people a part of the attack? Most definitely. And that's when we have to feel unafraid to critique politically and ideologically those among us who sell us out, who interrupt our struggle for freedom, and are apologists for a white supremacist social system which reproduces whiteness and white privilege. But if a few Black people can get in, we are told that's progress. It's nothing of the sort.
The other thing I think is this too, and that is, traditionally we built these corporations, we got rid of all regulations and rules for them. We made trade deals where they could go rape and pillage around the world, and where if some country, if they spilled methyl ethyl horrible and all over some country, and that country wanted to sue them, they had to go to these trade organizations, these trade deals, to some fake court that was put together by the corporations that made the trade deal, right? So they go around the world, they do all of these terrible things. It seems to me that as other powers have risen, as other countries have made it more difficult, that we built these monsters and used our military and intelligence to overthrow governments so they could feed. As it gets more difficult for them to feed, they've turned inward. And now it seems to me that they are preying on the working class, the Black white working class, the white working class, the Latino. We are all now, because I think in the past they saw Black people in America as cheap labor, right? They were cheap labor. They were easy to use. We'll use these people as cotton pickers. We'll use them as whatever we can. And great, we have a class of cheap labor. And then, okay, kind of ran out of them a little bit. We're going to bring in some Latinos. And now the white working class, they're cannon fodder also for these people. And so it seems to me that also there has to be a working class unity in America, because these monsters no longer do they delineate between Americans by their group or race or religion. I think they now see us in the same context that they saw the people in Niger, in Mali, in Bolivia. Now the American people are that food for them, or they'll use us as fuel for their machines. Yeah. Your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, that's their plan. But and this is for me the positive side of the calculation, that the American ruling class, individually and as a collective group, are weaker than they have perhaps ever been. It's not as though they produce thought or leadership or a vision for the people. This is a very, very weak ruling elite engulfed in crises. And something, Garland, if I were to make a prediction, this might be that election which delivers probably a strategic blow to the ruling class and its capacity to rule. If the covers are pulled off of them, if their true nature can be seen and understood, I would say that somehow we're not that far. We're not that far from the collapse of the ruling class. Now, there are a lot of things besides the fact that they're weak, etc. And that's when I say weak, personally weak, politically weak, ideologically weak. They're faced with some problems that the American ruling class has never faced with. And I'll start with $35 trillion of government debt on a GDP of 25 trillion dollars. So over 100% more is in the government's indebtedness as against the GDP. Now, the point of this, at some point, the U.S. government cannot continue to borrow by printing money. Now, what does the ruling class do? Since you got us into this problem, do you have a way to get us out? I don't think they do. And at that point, they confront their own people, that is the people of this country, who said, you created this problem. In Philadelphia, you created this problem. And don't come to us asking for higher property taxes, for higher prices on everything, water, gas, whatever people need to survive, rent, food, and say, you solve the problem. The people, no, you have to solve the problem, ruling class, or get out of the way and let the people begin to take power. The Black Panthers had a wonderful slogan, all power to the people. And it takes on greater significance right now. All power to the people. Well, what is all power to the people? That's the definition of democracy, the rule of the people. And that is what I think, and it's going to be a titanic struggle. They're weak, they're stupid, but they're not going to give up easily. And there are going to be many stages and steps in this process. There are going to be Trumps and others like Trump. But the people will learn, and the people will ultimately produce their own leaders. That is, in a lot of ways, the story of humanity. Societies reach a certain level of crisis, and then there has to be a resolution of that crisis. Often the resolution of a crisis like this is to replace an old ruling elite with a new class of people to rule. And I usually use the language of an all people's struggle. An all people struggle where the demands are so all inclusive. When you talk about democracy, now I know there are debates about what kind of democracy, but it's obvious that today when you talk about democracy, you're talking about the people's rights, their human and civil rights, to know, to not be lied to be governed in ways that that are human, that are appropriate to a democratic society. But we're at that moment where either we go forward to a new democracy, what I call a revolutionary democracy, based upon a broad coalition or united front of all the people who have democratic aspirations. And for me, it is starting with the poor, the least of these, the most downtrodden. The struggle for peace is a all humanity struggle. Nobody that has an ounce of sense would not be for peace against a nuclear war, and so on and so forth. The doing away with poverty. We can do these things, but not with the current ruling class.
Yeah,
Uh,
I
you
think
know,
you're
so
right. And I think you're right. And I think that one of the things that has to happen, and I think is in the process of happening, and let me say this, particularly if Donald Trump, and again, people don't go in the chat, Trump stuff. I'm not, this is not here to, say Donald Trump is the second coming of Eugene Debs, for God's sake. But my point is this, that and particularly with the Donald Trump, a guy who in many ways can be quite a distasteful person at times, right?
absolutely.
But I think this puts an exclamation mark on what I'm going to say. If Donald Trump wins because, and we look at the numbers, and he got a significant number of Black and Latino, whatever, votes of people, of particularly Black people who traditionally wouldn't vote for a Donald Trump type person, who even now would say, "No, I don't like Trump. I have trouble with Trump's race issues, blah 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 blah." And don't get me wrong, I have specifically heard this in the Black community, but stuff's too high. It's too high. A friend of mine, a business man, you know how much I pay for gas now for my business and my crews, and he has a lawn service. He sends various crews out here. Man, you know how much I got to pay for gas now for these mowers and this and that. You know how much I'm paying for that? People that are simply saying, I can overlook the things I don't like about Donald Trump. Not that Donald Trump can even fix it or not fix it, but if Donald Trump, if people say, I'll vote for Donald Trump, despite the things that I don't like about him regarding race and other issues, right? It thoroughly discredits the Black misleadership class and everything they stand for. The idea that they can stick a brown face in front of me and that I can feel like I got something if this old step and fetch it guy goes back and gets his check every 2 weeks and I get nothing out of the deal. The fact that I will overlook him and vote for a Donald Trump, I think thoroughly discredits all of the Black misleadership class and puts them in their place. And here's something, a problem they have. It sends a message to the ruling elite and their leaders, a terrible message. And the message to their leaders is, these old step and fetch it people that you thought could deliver the Black people to you can't do it. The Black people are done to them, are done with them. And at that point, their value to the ruling elite is zero, and they go down the tubes.
And that's the point. That's the point. And we can't, as a people, be free to conduct the struggle that we must conduct as long as we have this parasitic Black misleadership class sucking the blood of the people. And so I agree with you. If they can't deliver the Black vote in Philadelphia, they have no reason for existence. You know what I'm saying? And, I'm one of those people, who believes that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends to justice. Black people have to get some justice. And whoever's in the way, we need to move beyond. I'm not proud to have a Black face in a high place. That never impressed me, even when I was young. And I still am, I guess. But, even then, why? Hakeem Jeffries, I'm not impressed. Jim Clyburn, I am not impressed at all. I came up when the likes of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King and Diane Nash, and we could just name a whole gang of people. I saw the eloquence of their lives, the way they lived with courage, moral decency. When I look at these people, it's an embarrassment. People who produced a Paul Robeson, and now we got Jim Clyburn. Is that what we end up with after all this? You know what I'm saying? How did this happen? Who produced this? Who finances these people? Well, in part, we know that the Congress of the United States is owned by the Zionist lobby. And if the Congress is owned by them, you know most Black elected officials are owned by them. They pretty much make no secret of it. And so, but we have to regain our dignity as a people. And when I say our dignity, that which made Black people and our struggle the envy of the world, the great leaders of revolutionary movements from Ho Chi Minh to Fidel Castro to Patrice Lumumba and Kwame Nkrumah, they came to drink from the wells of the Black struggle. All of them, all of them. And who would want to be a part of some of this stuff that we got going on now? You know, I mean, the example of how to fight with dignity, how to fight with morality, how to frame the revolutionary vision. We contributed to this, and not that long ago. So I think we have to say it, and I hope some of those people that I just mentioned are listening. Because I'm a guy like this. If you don't like it, you know where I'm at. We can debate it. You know what I'm saying? I consider people like you to be house Negroes of the worst type. And but I think, and I am optimistic. I tell you the truth, I am really optimistic for the reasons that we have talked about, that the ruling elite will be defeated, I think, in 2024. They cannot, I don't think they have the capacity to hold the tide back that's about to engulf them. It's ironic to say, and maybe people won't understand it, but this could be an election that liberates the working people and the poor from illusions about the ruling class. For Black people, it will be a step towards liberating us from this idea that everybody that looks like us is us. Most of the elites, the politicians and intellectuals and others that look like us are not us. So we will redefine ourselves as a people. I think that we have all that we need. This is the year of James Baldwin, James Arthur Baldwin, to be more specific. This is his year, his 100th anniversary. We've been celebrating him here in Philadelphia, not just celebrating, but studying him. And one thing that he says, and I think it advances revolutionary thinking, he said that Black people must restore their struggle, must recapture their struggle, their moment in history. We had no alternative. We could not go slow. Baldwin said, because we Black folk have a rendezvous with history. And he called upon us to seek out that leadership that best expressed the highest standards of us as a people. And I think that's where we are. I think we can do it, Garland, but I think it's going to take some sacrifice. It's going to take an ability to see through the propaganda of the ruling elites, and most of what they do is propaganda. I think that's where we are right now.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tony Monteiro. And tell people where they can find out more information and they can follow your work with the Saturday Free School in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, they can always go to our Facebook page, and every Saturday we have our Saturday Free Schools. We discuss all of the burning topics and issues of the day, including many philosophical and theoretical issues. You can also find us on Saturdays. This is at 10:30 on our YouTube page, the Saturday Free School. And also, you can find us at our James Baldwin site, the Year of James Baldwin. And so there are a lot of ways to find out about us, what we're doing, the way we look at the world, how we see the struggle ahead, and how we attempt to unite people, but principled unity and critical unity, not just bowing down or going along to get along. So that's where you can find us.
Well, thank you very much. I certainly appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to hang out with us. Look forward to talking to you again soon. And and I have some other guests that I do a weekly series with, and I would love to talk to you about, hopefully, as your schedule allows, doing, having a weekly discussion.
Yeah, I want to talk to you about that. I really look forward to it, Garland. And this has been beautiful being with you. And it's been, as I told you, it's been too long.
Far too long. Thank you very much. Don't forget, everyone, share this on all your social media platforms. Thank you very much.